Welcome back to State and Local Government and Politics. Module 4, Key Actors in the Policy Process. Part 5, Political Parties and Elections. Political parties are important actors in state and local public policy processes throughout the country. Typically, political parties reflect a political culture with distinct worldviews that are organized to seek power in government. Political parties provide a means for the organization and direction of competition for political power. They prioritize issues to be addressed by the government and recruit candidates to stand in elections at the national, state, and local levels of government. After elections are held, the winning party takes control of the government, and the minority party calls into question the majority party's actions. Political parties can also facilitate the work of state government if the same party controls both the legislature and the governor's office, thus minimizing the often divisive effect of separation of powers and checks and balances. Divided control of state government by different parties makes governance more difficult, requiring skillful negotiation to bring differing policy preferences into some degree of accord to permit effective action to address the problems requiring government attention. The principal function of political parties in democratic countries is the development of a solid and durable linkage between the party's electorate and policymakers. Parties are expected to represent the social composition of those who mandate them and to respond politically to the demands of their electorate. Additional functions carried out by political parties in the U.S. include: they represent groups of interest in the U.S. states and communities. Once elected, however, elected officials not only represent their own party's supporters, but also must govern in the interest of all constituents in their respective jurisdictions. They help to simplify choices for voters by organizing and articulating positions on issues facing the state and local governments where they operate. They can help stimulate interest in public affairs, in elections, and in democratic governance in general. There are different types of political parties in democratic countries, with missionary parties and broker parties being two of the major subdivisions. A missionary party is rather ideological in orientation. These parties tend to maintain a high degree of control over membership and carefully monitor who can make use of party label as a candidate. Missionary parties are most often found in parliamentary-style governments and are seldom seen in state and local politics in the U.S. Broker parties are political parties trying to appeal to the largest number of people, more concerned with gaining votes than with maintaining rigid ideologies and willing to alter policies in order to gain influence. Political parties in the U.S. are less ideologically oriented and seek to broker a multitude of interests in order to appeal to the widest segment of the electorate. Broker parties have weak control over their membership, since it is typically self-selected, and those interested in elective office generally nominate themselves in American politics. Candidates for office in our country are selected using primary elections and caucuses, two candidate recruitment processes that allow interested voters within each party to make the selection of their party candidates instead of the party leadership. A primary election is a preliminary election where voters nominate candidates for office, and a caucus is a meeting of people whose goal is political or organizational change. American political parties can be generally characterized as centrist concerning policy preference when compared to parties in other post-industrial nations. Republicans and Democrats draw support from almost every major socioeconomic group, with a few noteworthy exceptions. This desire for electoral success generally leads the Republicans and Democrats alike to try to appear ideologically moderate in general and label their opponents as being extreme in their views. This playing toward the middle approach is reinforced by the fact that many voters characterize themselves as neither Republican nor Democrat in basic leaning, but rather see themselves as independents that can vote for either party's candidates depending on whose message is more appealing. Another important feature is the existence of the two-party system. Since the 1860s, the same two political parties have dominated the American political system: Democrats and Republicans. Most Americans today consider themselves to be either Republicans or Democrats, and while an increasing number of Americans are identifying themselves as independents, they still vote for the two main parties at the ballot box. Two-party systems, It refers to a government in which the same two political parties are nearly always elected to dominate the political process and where one party will hold the majority in the legislature. Third parties have had a tough time establishing themselves in the United States because of our single-member district form of electoral representation, wherein the candidate with the plurality of votes, not necessarily the majority, wins the election. A single-member district is the most common electoral system in the United States, used to elect House members and many state and local officials. Each district votes on one person to represent them in a legislative body. Many other post-industrial democracies have proportional representation systems with multi-member districts. Such a form of electoral representation tends to encourage multi-party systems because multiple seats are proportionally distributed based on what proportion of the vote a party wins. Two other relatively unique features found in some states in local government elections, including in Virginia, are the open primary and nonpartisan offices. Open primaries are primary elections where voters do not need to be members of a specific political party in order to vote for that party's candidate. Voters still must be registered to vote, but can decide to vote for their favorite candidate regardless of which party registration they hold. Most states have closed primary systems, which are preferred by the parties, where only persons who are registered members of the political party can vote using the ballot of that political party. Many members of the public, journalists, and even elected officials themselves decry partisan politics. The common argument is that partisan politics too often leads to a stalemate in government and the election of non-responsive public officials. Because of this supposed tendency, some argue for open primaries to remove the influence of parties. On the other hand, many political scientists and political parties believe that partisanship is generally a good thing in the electoral process because it offers voters cues about the choices facing them. In a sense, you know something about where candidates or current elected officials stand on issues if they identify themselves as Republicans or Democrats. In Part 6 of Module 4, we'll discuss government structures and the policy process.